My paper claims that the absurd condition, the absurd human condition that has been identified by many philosophers, I'll be mentioning Carl Jung and Thomas Carlyle, it finds a contact or needs to for a reformulation in the epistemological issue of the paradox of knowability or the knowability paradox. That is my paper in one sentence. So I got something written down here. Let me read in a comfortable pace. If my timer rings, I'll stop there. In this paper, I try to make two philosophical issues meet. The first issue concerns the question of the limits of our knowing, and the second, the absurd condition. The first is an epistemological issue. It concerns our epistemic limits. The second is an issue that is identified with the question of the meaning of life. This comes from inquiries into values and norms, not any value or norm, but plausibly the one value or norm that grounds any other value or norm that we may be interested in inquiring into. There are things unknown. I do not know under which conditions and considerations we can reject that claim. If it means that there are facts that we do not know now and are yet to know. The assumption that we do not know certain things and the state of affairs drives our pursuit to expand the bounds of knowledge. But the in principle unknowable, that is, things that are not only unknown but that can never be known, is an altogether different beast. It would be hard to have the same conviction towards the existence of in principle unknowables as we have for knowable unknowns. Philosophers like Michael Dummett and Hilary Putnam do not allow the idea of the unknowable theta. Broadly, any form of anti-realism supposedly would commit to the inexistence of the unknowable or its unintelligibility as a concept. For them, what is yet known is knowable. Amongst the unknowns, there is nothing that cannot be known. This stance, called the knowability thesis, is ground for a paradox. I have only two citations here, or quotations rather, but this is a bit longish. But bear with me, the other is very short. Fitch's paradox of knowability, also known as the knowability paradox or Church-Fitch's paradox, concerns any theory committed to the thesis that all truths are knowable. Historical examples of such theories arguably include Michael Dummett's semantic and realism, that is the view that any truth is verifiable; mathematical constructivism, that is the view that the truth of a mathematical formula depends on the mathematical theory of truth, that is the truth is what we would agree to at the limit of inquiry; logical positivism, that is the view that meaning is given by verification conditions; Kant's transcendental idealism, that is that all knowledge is knowledge of appearances; and George Berkeley's idealism, that is to be perceivable. Brogard and Salerno, 2002. So, the knowability paradox has this possibility of, being a problem for all this, this gamut of philosophical theories and positions, which we take to be very important. Starting from acceptable principles from model logic, Fitch, as cited in Konvik 2006 and Salerno 2009, shows that the knowability thesis, all things are knowable, entails a statement, the counterintuitive statement, all things are known. The entailment, which retains a strangeness even after the initial astonishment, shakes the knowability thesis at its roots. More relevantly, Fitch showed en route to showing the knowability paradox that the existence of truths unknown entails the existence of unknowable truths or truths which are necessarily unknown. To render the concept of unknowable truths meaningless would be to render the concept of unknown truth meaningless, since the relation of entailment is understood to preserve meaning. Taking a cue from this paradox, Rescher 2010 calls for a project for agnosiology. This is a neologism Gnoseology is the study of what is not known, as would epistemology be a theory of knowledge. The study of the unknown. Philosophy has spent all its energy on what is known and its expansion of that realm with hardly any attention to the nature of the unknown. Though it is not clear from his deliberations whether there is an argument for the existence of the unknowable, he offers illustrations of concepts whose exemplifications cannot be known. So he has many examples, but one which strikes me is the example of the unknown soldier. If we say that there exists someone who is an unknown soldier, we are ready to accept that it is a meaningful statement and a plausibly true. If we instantiate the existential statement with the name of a particular individual, then we get a false statement. Because once we know the name of the unknown soldier, in a way we have defeated the use of the phrase the unknown soldier. Such terms which cannot have a home in a particular are tellingly called vagrant predicates. They are homeless. He thus shows us the point that the unknown soldier can never be known. If someone is identified as a hitherto unknown soldier, then that soldier is no longer unknown, but becomes known. The reason why anti-realists would not let a limit to knowledge could be because they subscribe to the view that limit talks are nonsensical. If so, they share the logical positivists' distaste for nonsense to the point of seeing nonsense where there might not be any. To talk of limits of thought, Wittgenstein noted, we should be able to have a vantage from the other side of the limit. This would mean that we have closed the limit to think unthinkable thoughts. There has been a stream of scholarship on what Wittgenstein's views are on the concept of the limits of thought, and the idea that limits are utter nonsense that infects any statement that has it as a component to make it into a nonsense seems to have gained the upper hand in recent literature. One can see Wittgenstein's 2020, Priest 2002. Priest 2002 takes what Wittgenstein encountered in his philosophy as a specimen of thought at its limits. He called them the limit paradox. What Kant encountered in the antinomies reveals the nature of doing philosophy at the limits of thought. Priest's diagnosis has ameliorated the vitiating philosophical atmosphere when it comes to limit talks. For Priest, we have to embrace the contradiction at the limits of thought. To that extent, he admits the existence of limits, and the contradictions are evidence that there are such limits. In the Christian picture, our thought has what it takes for a transcendence of that limit, but it cannot be without contradicting the definition of the limit of thought. By definition, the limit of thought is the limit that thought cannot cross over. Contra Kant, Priest takes this contradiction not as an illusion of reason, but rather as a true capture of what happens at the limit. We should, he recommends, embrace it. Transcendence, albeit pulled and held back by immanence, as a dictate of the limits of thought. So we need to wrap around thought a little bit with his schema called the enclosure schema, where he understands Nagarjuna, starting from Nagarjuna, till Kant, and after Kant, that why we meet even in Russell's these paradoxes of the paradoxes is because this has nothing to do with the limits of language, but rather with the nature of the thing being talked about. As something that is at the core of our thoughts and concepts. This means that we cannot get much of the other side of the limit. We cannot know much of what lies there. But we have come to know that we cannot know what lies at the other side of the limit. So this is the first thread. My paper is very simple. There are only two threads. So that is the first thread. Now for the other thread. The absurd has been identified as coming to realize that life does not have any intrinsic meaning. The meaning of meaning is many, but in the context of this paper, meaning as ask of life primarily means the significance of life and its worthiness. The question of whether there is any meaning to life asks whether there is any significance to it. It asks what we should aim for in our lives, what is the purpose of our lives. The question to which no answer is forthcoming and because of which the absurd condition is initiated is asked because we want to be sure whether our aims in life, our projects, our self-narratives and values measure up to being true or right. So sometimes we want to be sure whether what we have inherited as values, what we have found as values, are really the truth. Okay. So once we have that, once that mood descends, then we cannot help but ask that question. For Camus, absurdity is the situation wherein we ask the question of the meaning of life, but the cosmos remains silent. And for many of us who would not rely to tradition, sometimes it can happen so that we don't have much to rely on. Everything, tradition, the cosmos seem to be silent. The question is unanswerable. Maurice Flick took unanswerable questions as meaningless because, of course, we can understand he was a logical positivist, a verificationist camp. Any question that does not show how they are to be answered, even if we are not in the right condition to answer them, is meaningless according to him. Since we cannot propose how we are to answer the question according to his criterion of meaningfulness of questions, our question about the meaning of life is meaningless. There might be many unanswerable questions, but the question of the meaning of life is not like any other because it is at the center of our self-understanding. We have the intuition that our life matters, but how are we to be sure that it matters if we have no idea how it matters? If our intuition is wrong, assuming it to be wrong, we are then to acknowledge that our life does not matter. And that is a very, very, very strange, very, very unsettling consequence. Then why should we keep on living? This is a question that presses on us with great urgency. Camus' poetic expression conveys that life is without any cosmic inherent meaning. If it has to have some meaning, we are the ones to invest it with meaning. But I'm a little bit not happy with this whole project of overcoming the truth of nihilism. There seems to be a second order pretension. Nagel's 2012 definition of the absurd, on the other hand, takes absurdity to be the result of our ability to transcend the seriousness with which we go on with our lives. And I was very happy when Sir Sebastian mentioned this, because this is at the core. To see that it might not have any meaning. So this is what somehow makes us, maybe we are a bit chauvinistic, but we feel that we are different from other beings because we have the ability to reflect on this. To see that it might not have any meaning, but sliding back to immanence, to be seriously trying to survive and sustain life, which I will be doing when I go home after this. I will be sliding back to my family life, not asking these questions about the meaning of life. His diagnosis is that absurd situation arises because of our ability to transcend, to see that there is no meaning to life. But to go on living, we have to go on as if life matters. And as if all that is conducive to it also matters. We should celebrate our unique ability to transcend, which is the cause of the unsettling, absurd condition. It prescribes that we should live our lives with irony in the face of this absurdity. The above two definitions of the absurd, though presented differently, have a certain epistemological slant. A certain implicit claim to knowledge underlies both. And you might have already seen that point. Seemingly, Camus' definition of the absurd says that we cannot get to know the meaning of life. That is, but the surface reading. Digging a bit deeper, we find Camus saying that the answer is not coming for the simple reason that there is no answer. If Camus believed that there is a meaning to life which we cannot access, would he have said that it is up to us to create meanings of our individual lives? Not being able to know does not entail the inexistence of the object of knowledge unless we have assumed some variant of the knowability thesis. Arguing for the inexistence of something because it is not known would be committing the fallacy of the appeal to ignorance. That is 15 minutes. I'm almost there. Arguing for the inexistence of something since it is not known would be committing the fallacy of the appeal to ignorance. Not to impute Camus such an appeal, we have to say that he knows that there is no meaning to life. Nagel's knowing that there is no meaning to life is grounded in his transcendence or transcendence or ability that sees us wallowing in immanence. Transcendence is the act of reaching out and going beyond. We all know that. In the context here, it is the ability to transcend immanence, the boundedness of life. That is the many programmed acts and responses that constitute the business of living. Through this human capacity of removing ourselves from the momentum of life to look at it from the sidelines as a spectator would, observe any spectacle, we come to know that life has no rhyme or reason. No rhyme or reason. It simply is. Nagel knows this. He knows that there is no meaning to life. But positively, no. Kamu knows that there is no intrinsic meaning to life. Nagel also knows that there is no meaning to life. The first thinker wants us to rebel against the meaninglessness of life by living in rebellion against the fact of our lives that do not come with any reason to live. Nagel, on the other hand, finds this attitude tinged with self-pity and suggests that we continue to embrace the contradiction and continue living with irony, living with a kind of celebration that we have come to know that we cannot know. That, for him, is a mark of being human. Contrary to both thinkers, I assert ignorance and an irreparable ignorance at that. We are ignorant, we shall remain ignorant. The formulation of the absurd I attempt here is negative. I see it as arising due to realization of a lack, which is in principle irreparable. Okay, I think I have made some sense, so I'll skip. The inescapability, the crushing impossibility that we would never know while we are here is a heavy burden settled on us. Ignorance is bliss, we might say, but knowledge too can be, and we would love to have the knowledge. However, the knowledge that one must remain ignorant of a reason that is at the core of who we are, is a form of fantastic torture. It is documented now that the feeling of abandonment that adoptees have reported, the experience of not being able to reach to their biological parents, is a lifelong trauma. Persons who do not know their biological fathers and mothers have also been reported to have dispositions towards anxiety and depression. So we might be in such a situation. Compared to this burden, the stone that Sisyphus has to push, or had to push uphill again and again for eternity, is light. And in the myth of Sisyphus, Camus says, I leave Sisyphus at the foot of the mountain. One always finds one's burdens again, but Sisyphus teaches us the higher fidelity that negates the gods and raises rocks. He too concludes that all is well. This universe henceforth without a master seems to him neither sterile nor futile. Its atom of that stone, its mineral flake of that night-filled mountain, in itself forms a world. The struggle itself towards the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Camus imagines Sisyphus happy because he accepts his fate of the absurd condition, yet exists in it in defiance. Knowing that Sisyphus is a being who traverses the boundary between the divine and the human and knows beyond what is available to mere humans. He is conscious. He knows that he is conscious. He knows that he has consciousness. We cannot help but feel that we have to imagine Sisyphus happy. My reason from Camus is different. Because he knows, Camus knows that our burden is heavier than his stone. Sisyphus' stone.
Dr. Sharma's paper is very interesting and now open to questions. However, I would also like to make some comments after the questions to answer to questions.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Dr. UTTAM, thank you. Congratulations. Well, I have a query. Something pertaining to the myth of Sisyphus in the museum research. And and also Kafka's metamorphosis.
Yes.
And I have been working on these two philosophers for a long time. I have published some 3-4 articles.
Oh, wonderful, sir.
Yeah, but one of my students now did her PhD on Gabo and Kafka.
Okay.
Well, what exactly, you have to try to somehow postulate that, there is an epistemological dimension of absurd, which I somehow deny. Because Camus says that we are the realization of the absurd, not experience of the absurd. So the absurd is neither in the subject nor in the object. But in between, the moment of which both are actually trying to be together, then comes the absurd. Therefore, absurd is actually a kind of a, the Sisyphus, as you know, Sisyphus, when he rolls down the rock, that particular moment only he realizes that, life is meaningless. So also, in Kafka's case, metamorphosis, there was answer, for instance, see, you are working as a medical representative, I too was working as a medical representative for 1.5 years. That is one of the best companies of this country, man maker. I was getting a good salary, I would say maybe around 1,800 rupees those days, 1977.
Okay.
But those days, even a professor was not doing it even half of that. But I found that my job is actually meaningless. In the sense that, getting ready with the tie and coat and everything, going to a doctor and talking to him about my product and everything, And that was the evening I found myself metamorphosis. I mean to say. So Gregor Samsa found that he is a metamorphosis, though he is an existent. At the same time, he knows that life is so meaningless. Therefore, when we are trying to search out for meaning where there is only meaninglessness is there, then only absurd comes. Therefore, it is an ontological truth, not an epistemological truth. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay. So, there's not much that I could, retort. You consider it to be an ontological truth, but it means that I have not been successful in presenting, because I've been trying to formulate through the paradox of knowability that there are certain unknowns. For me, the absurd. I identify a particular experience of the absurd when I come to know that there are certain things that are in principle unknowable. So maybe I'm trying to look at this work. Metamorphosis, I have to go back again. It's been a long time since I read that. But the absurd of Nagel and the myth of Sisyphus, I have been studying recently. And the point, you said that when Sisyphus, when he finds the rock having rolled down, and in the moment he's descending. So you mentioned that the absurd is in certain kind of a correlation between the object of absurdity and the subject of absurdity. I'm fine with it. If knowing has to be formulated in a certain kind of correlation, I am fine with that. But the point is that there is an aspect of the absurd that can be understood epistemologically.
I just wanted to thank you, Uttam, for
Thank you, sir.
the question. I just wanted to say, when you were talking about agnosticism, the starting point from your lecture, you referred to agnosticism. Do you find any kind of similarity between agnosticism and Camus' absurdity? This is number one. Even if absurdity is there, Camus says yes, life is full of absurdity, and we have a rebellion attitude in nature to find out that absurdity, because there is no meaning of life. And it is true. It is true. And finding that absurdity makes your life meaningful. But do you think that finding itself is a kind of epistemological subject? That finding itself by the knower, by the subject, is also a subject of epistemology. Because when Camus was searching for rebellion, basically he is searching for meaning of life from a particular subjective point of view. that subjectivity makes epistemological absurdity possible. So you cannot avoid, though ignorance is blessing, but ignorance is a kind of knowledge also. And when he is making, our life is meaningful because there is a distinction between discontent and suffering. Discontent and suffering. Asantosh and vidroh. Jantrana. Jantrana. Asantosh and jantrana. In Hindi, it's a beautiful word, So our life will be meaningful when we can make a distinction between discontent and suffering. So this is also a kind of epistemology. So this epistemology is not agnosticism. This kind of epistemology, searching for a meaning of life, is not at all agnosticism, not at all a kind of ignorance. Yes, even if ignorance is blessing. In the last part of the lecture he said, where you are referring to Sisyphus, the myth of the Sisyphus. You are also referring that ignorance is blessing. But that ignorance is also a kind of epistemology, kind of knowledge.
Thank you, sir. When writing and delivery, there's sometimes there's some gaps. The thing was that from very hard technical works in model logic, the idea that there has to be certain unknowables. If we are to preserve certain simple, logical principles, then it is. If we start from the thesis that if given any truth, that truth is knowable, we are forced to a paradox saying that there are things which we cannot know. This is the knowability paradox, and it's not very hard to get once we have the basic logical apparatus.
This is not agnosticism.
No, let me come. So I said, ignorance is bliss, but I would want to know, that's what I am saying. I would want to know, but if I buy the thought process that leads to the knowability paradox, I know that I cannot know. But I would have loved to know the meaning of life. That's the point.
Do you say that I know that I cannot know, or do you say that I know that now I do not know? Do not say I cannot know. Now I do not know, but I may know in future. I do not close that.
So the knowability paradox, there's a distinction between the unknown and the unknowable matter. So the unknown means, there are many things that we don't know. For example, I don't know whether Madam will send me home today as I requested. But I will come to know when the time comes. That is the unknown. And that is the basic assumption of all our knowledge endeavors, to push the boundary of the known towards the unknown. But there is something called the unknowable, which many philosophers have deemed as unintelligible, meaningless nonsense. But there is recent literature which has brought that idea at the center of certain philosophical discussions.
Yes, I'm aware of it.
Okay.
I wanted to know your views.
Okay.
So there is a question at the back.
Will it be proper to coin the term absurd, suppose if it is beyond the scheme of knowledge? Because if it is not within the subject-object paradigm, then that may be an area or domain which we may call it an absurd. But there are also certain areas which go beyond knowledge. My question is that will it be proper to call it an absurd always?
No. I'm saying that it might not be, because because if you are not an agnostic, then either you have to toe the line of Kamu or some outward denial. But I'm not, because they try to overcome that somehow. But I'm not very sure whether there's meaning to life, there's no meaning to life. But they're pretty sure, according to my reading, that there's no meaning to life. There might be meaning to life, there might not be. So
But there is a distinction between agnosticism and the Pyrrhonian skepticism.
no, that's fine.
That-
For example, in Quentin Mayusu,
Yeah.
he has, theist, atheist,
Yeah.
agnostic, and there's a fourth one.
Yes.
He calls the Luciferian attitude.
Okay.
So, theist says that, God exists, atheist says that God does not exist, but the atheist buys the concept of the theist. The theists, they are related. And agnostics, they say, but the Luciferian attitude is an interesting one. Lucifer knows that God exists,
Yeah.
but he denies.
Yeah. So knowing something that exists and denying something from the skeptical
So
point of
that's
view.
the fourth, that's one of the
Yeah.
parts in the Luciferian. So
That is wonderful.
Yeah, so we can look here. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.